Okay, so this is a lecture and problems on international trade and business for economics. Chapters 3 and 6, one big lecture with the Moodle problems. And so let's get into it. First off, some of the things talked about we've already discussed, such as the principle of comparative advantage, compared with absolute advantage. And just as a refresher, comparative advantage is when you're trading or allowing trade to exist between two countries. And even if one country has an absolute advantage in the making of both products, that you allow one of the countries to specialize and make one of the products. It makes sense, especially if the nominal opportunity cost exists between the two. That being a good example I think I've used before is coffee and wheat. The United States might be able to make both coffee and wheat and be at an absolute advantage when dealing, say, with Colombia, but the extra resources it takes for us to produce coffee is taking away from us from producing something we are very good at, which is wheat. And though we might be better than Colombia in growing coffee, we are better off in allowing them to specialize and trade in producing coffee because it's beneficial to both the consumer and the producer. Now, you can go back through the rest of the lectures we've had before and get a better example of that, but we've already gone over it before, so I'm not going to repeat it. Now, we've even talked about trade and why that's an important aspect. These two particular chapters will talk about why trade is better than no trade. In fact, we will do graphs using the consumer-producer surplus like we have in previous chapters to show you exactly why trade is beneficial. Now we're going to start off, and I'm going to do 4 of them to show you. But first I want to talk about the different kinds of restrictions you can have when dealing with free trade. And those are, you can have restrictions on imports, restrictions on exports. You can do that through tariffs, which is nothing more than a tax. If you remember back to our previous lecture dealing with consumer-producer surplus, that was one of the things we talked about. Import quotas, that's another thing that we can do. All of these things we talked about before, you can go back and watch the consumer-producer surplus graphs. Those were dealing with one market, with the domestic market. We're going to show how that, using that, affects the overall global market. And just for your knowledge, the reasons that trade restrictions exist, make sure that's on there, or tariffs or imports, quotas, etc., exist, is for a handful of reasons. One is to have temporary trade restrictions to help infant industries. Now, infant industries are those industries that are brand new, that are just starting out. They need to be propped up till they get the feet underneath them. Think of it, the green technologies was an infant industry that we were supporting until we decided we weren't going to support it anymore. And then China took it over, and now they're supporting it. And what you do is you try to eliminate as much competition as you possibly can till they get on their feet. You can add tariffs or reduce tariffs to help or lower domestic unemployment. You can do it for reasons of national security. Obviously, you don't want to trade secrets such as an important computer chip for the stealth fighter. You don't want to be able to trade that on the open market for national security reasons. Tariffs can help protect against dumping. Dumping means, for instance, when the Japanese dumped the steel and automobiles on our shores in the 70s, by that I mean they were selling those vehicles and that steel over here at a price that was actually losing money for them, and they were trying to undercut us to gain a portion or a market share of the market. And we can protect against that through these kind of restrictions. So that's just to give you an idea of what we're talking about. Okay, so let's talk about the first graph. We're going to show free trade and exports. Now, like with any other graph we've had, here's demand and here's supply, and I believe, oops. Never could figure out why, even after I press the button, it doesn't want to register the right color. There. Now this first particular graph I drew on here, the one on the left-hand side, is dealing with the wheat production and demand in the world. And if you notice, here's the price given for that. Oops. Just like every other graph we've looked at. But this is for the world. Now what happens is that particular graph is going to be different than what's happening domestically. I want to make sure I drew that right. I don't think I gave it enough of a buffer. Let me do that one more time. Do it like this so you can see what's happening. A little bit easier, I think. Now, this point here on the second graph is obviously lower, and that is the price before trade, BT. This, if I walk this price over from the world market, it's higher. And that price is after trade. Now, what exactly is that showing me? If you look at this point here, at that price, consumers are demanding that amount and suppliers are supplying that amount. What is happening in reality is that because of the trade, obviously there's more supply of that good out there, hence the supply being larger. And the consumers are demanding less. In a domestic market, what this is really showing is you're exporting wheat, for instance. I'm getting a higher price on the open market. Why? Because there's more demand for that particular market. As opposed to 330 million people in the country, in the U.S., we have almost 7 billion people worldwide. Increased demand in relation to supply, and you have what? A higher price. That higher price means domestically, the consumers don't want to buy as much. Even though the supply is going to be higher because the suppliers want to supply more. What this difference is how much we are exporting because of that higher price. We're not buying as much wheat here in the U.S. because of the higher price, but our producers are supplying more because there's more demand on a global scale. And the difference between the two is the exporting. Now what you got, let me label this real fast. Oops, did that wrong. Probably should have done that before I drew everything in there. A, B, C, D, and E, and F. Okay. So if I do consumer surplus and producer surplus and total welfare, just like I did in the previous lectures and graphs, before anything happens, what's my consumer surplus? It's easy again. All you got to do is regurgitate to yourself everything above the consumer to the left of the quantity, and what happened there? Created a new graph. So you end up with A plus B plus C. Producer surplus, everything below the price to the left of the quantity, E plus F. Government's done nothing yet. Add the two together, A plus B plus C plus E plus F. Now what happens after you trade, after you export? Here's our new price. It's after trade. What's my consumer surplus at that point? It's everything above the price. And I want to just clean this up just a little bit. There we go. It's everything above the price, which is now this price after trade. To the left of the quantity, I can't go any further than that, domestically speaking. So, because we're looking at it from a domestic point of view. So consumer surplus in a domestic market ends up being A. What's my producer surplus? It's everything below what? Everything below the price they're getting to the left of the quantity, which ends up being B plus C plus D plus E plus F. Is the government getting anything? No. Total welfare now, add it up again. A plus B plus C plus D plus E plus F. What's the difference? The only difference is D right now. It's actually better off, total welfare, isn't it? Look at the difference here. The change then is I lost, as a consumer, B and C. In the producer, gained. What did he gain? B, C, and D. B plus C plus D. Nothing here for the government. Total welfare, therefore, is a positive D. You're telling me that exporting, even from a domestic point of view, is that the consumer suffers, the producer is better off, and the overall net effect to the economic system is a benefit. That's just from exporting. We will get to importing here in a second, and I'll show you that doing both actually benefits both sides. In fact, it's a reverse. In the export part of this, the consumer is hurt, the producer is benefited, and it's the overall net effect to the economic system. In importing, it's the consumer that's better off, the producer that's hurt, and the overall net effect to the total welfare is a positive. So if you do both the consumer and producers end up with more, and the total welfare is an increase. They both benefit. And I can show this. Let's go and do an import. And again, I've got the price dictated in the world market. Oh, wait a minute, sorry, did that wrong. That's what I get for jumping ahead. One of these days, these pens are going to work right. Okay. So here's the price. In the world market. And And in the open domestic market, this is the price before trade. This is the price after trade. And if I label this A, B, C, D. Okay. So what's happening here? In the domestic market before trade happens, as far as importing, I've got a certain price. When I import, that means the consumer's price is going to drop. Why? Well, think of it this way. I've got 100 wheat farmers in this country producing a certain amount of wheat. And the supply is a certain amount. There's my curve. I have a demand of 330 million people. Price is dictated by supply and demand. Suddenly, we start importing wheat as well. There's more suppliers of wheat. What happens to the overall price? It drops because it becomes less scarce. Hence the price after trade. You still got 330 million people, but the supply has really increased, driving down the price. So again, before I do anything, my before consumer surplus is everything above the price to the left of the quantity, which is A. Producer surplus, everything below the price. Red. To the left of the quantity, which is B plus C. Government's still not doing anything. Add up A plus B plus C. Afterwards, what happens? I've got a price after trade. And at that price, what's happening? I've got this supply and I've got this demand. Right? Because there's a lower price, the consumers here in this country are demanding more of the product. But the wheat farmers here are not producing as much because they're not making as much of a price. So the difference between the two is what you're importing. And the consumer surplus now is everything above the price the consumer's paying, which is what? After trade, it's everything above this price to the left of the quantity they're actually getting, which is A plus B plus D. The supplier is everything below the price that they're getting to the left of the quantity, which is only C. A plus B plus C plus D. Change. The consumer is better off. He gained B plus D. The producer is worse off. He lost B. Government still didn't do anything. Total welfare. Total welfare is a change of D. Increase. So, what do you got? The consumer's better off, the producer's not, and the total welfare is an increase. That's importing. Go back to exporting. Exporting. Consumer's worse off, producer's better off, total welfare is better off. Look at the two. I lost B and C in the consumer surplus in exporting. I gained B and D in the importing. Let's say it's a wash. I gained in producer surplus B, C, and D in the exporting. I lost B. Seems to me they're still a little better off. Total welfare gained D in exporting, gained D in importing. The overall net effect is at the very worst for consumers and producers is that it's a wash, which in reality it's not. But the overall net effect to the economic system is a positive. Somebody's benefiting somewhere. In reality, what happens is consumers are getting more product at a lower price. Suppliers or producers are making and selling more products at a lower price as well. But that lower price is offset by the amount of quantity that they're selling. And it could be a higher price. It really depends. Either way, it doesn't matter. The overall net effect to the economic system is a positive. That's why trade is a good thing. Are there going to be some people who are hurt by it? Of course. Combine those two graphs. Somebody in the consumer part is going to get hurt. Somebody in the producer side is going to get hurt. Somebody's going to get hurt. But the overall net effect for the country is better. If you want to equate it into a local economy, think of it this way. It might be worse off for West Virginia locally and better off for the country that we import and or export or overall trade energy products. And we can see that from coal. If we just imported energy products, it would hurt coal. It would hurt the producer. If we just exported coal, it would help the coal industry. We do both. And sometimes it's a good thing and sometimes it's a bad thing. But the overall net effect is it's better for the country. Okay. So that is imports and exports. Let's do one dealing with tariffs. Now, tariffs are trade taxes. Taxes you levy on something coming into your country. So, let's do this. I'm going to do a demand and supply curve. And then a demand. There's supply. Really wish it was. Come on. Okay. Okay. Here's the price for the world. Here's our domestic market. Let me label these. A, B, C. Yeah, I better do this. Let's walk this across. This is the price on the world stage. This is the price on the world stage plus a tariff. That's T plus T. And this is the domestic market price. Now, we'll do this. I'm going to erase that domestic market price. And I'm going to label that all A. This is a B. Let's see. D here. E. You'll understand what this means after I do everything. F, G. Okay. Okay, on the left-hand side of the graph there, that's the world wheat market. On the right-hand side is the domestic wheat market. We're dealing with what's called a tariff. Now, before anything happens, let's go ahead and do our consumer surplus before anything happens. Price. Everything about the price the consumer is paying to the left of the quantity which is what? What price are they paying before the tariff is put into effect? It's the price on the world market. Do not confuse that with the equilibrium at this point. Okay? We're dealing from the world market. So everything above this price, to the left of the quantity, which is giving you what? A plus B plus C plus D plus E plus F. What we're trying to show you is that the trade is better than having a tariff. Producer surplus. Everything below the price, producer's getting, to the left of the quantity. G, government does nothing. Total welfare, just add them up. A plus B plus C plus D plus E plus F plus G. Now, with tariffs, and a tariff is a tax. So like any other tax we've done, it means it's a higher price. That's the price W plus T. What is that doing? If I look and draw the actual effects on the graph, just repeat to yourself the definition of consumer surplus, for instance. It's everything above the price the consumer's paying, which is the PW plus T. To the left of the quantity, wait, do I stop there? No, I keep going to the demand curve, which is there. So, with the tariff put in, the higher price, the consumer surplus is A plus B. Producer surplus. Everything below the price the producer is getting, to the left of the quantity, which is what? Well, he's getting the price with the tariff. So it's this. C plus G. Government still didn't do anything. Oh, wait a minute. Government did do something. Sorry. What did the government do? They put a tariff in effect, which is a tax. And that tax is what? It is, green up, the difference between the price the supplier's getting, the price, or I should say the differences in quantity here. See that box? Now, why did I do that in green? Why didn't I do D and F? This difference here between the consumer and producer surplus, this is the import before tariffs. That quantity. This is after tariffs. I know it's kind of hard to see, but that's what you heard me say it. So, what's really happening? We had a world market that had the import before tariffs, just like when we did the import graph, the difference between what's being supplied and what's being demanded in the domestic market. After the tariff was put into effect, it affects both the producer and the consumer. The loss of D and F, for instance. And that E is the actual tax or tariff that the government's getting. All right, so what's my total welfare now? It's A plus B plus C plus E plus G. My change. The consumers lost C, D, E, and F. They're obviously not better off. They're paying a higher price for less quantity. The producer, netted C, is better off with the tariff. Why? Because domestic producers are, not the global market. The domestic producers are because of that tariff. It's restricting trade. The government's better off. They're getting tariffs. The overall effect to the economic system, minus D, and minus F. In other words, consumers are really hurt with a trade restriction of a tariff. Producers gain some, maybe a good chunk even. The government gets some, but the overall effect to the economic system is a negative. We lose in the overall economic system because of a tariff. We see that consumers lose more than producers and government gain. On net, the deadweight loss associated with the new tariff is represented by that D and F, the inefficiency. Now, let's do an import quota. An import quota, just like with the tariff, is a restriction. So, say this is a price in the world. Price, world. This is a price world with quota. Still less than what the domestic price is. So we have, and I'm actually going to do that a little bit cleaner so you can see that better. I'm going to do it here. Price world plus quota. Yeah, that's better. Just so I can fit this in. Here's A. Here's B. C. D. E. F. That's it. Forgot G. Okay. So, let's do the consumer producer surplus. First off, we're looking at it from the point of view of trading. So you have the world price, and that's what we're using as a price. Consumer surplus, again, everything above the price the consumer's paying, which is the world price, to the left of the quantity they're demanding, which gives you what? A plus B plus C plus D plus E plus F. The producer surplus, everything below the price the producer's getting to the left of the quantity, which is G. Government's doing nothing. Add the two together. B plus C plus D plus E plus F plus G. Now, an import quota is put into effect that does what? It's a legal limit on the imported quantity of a good that is produced abroad and can be sold in domestic markets. So, afterwards, and that drives up the price, what's my consumer surplus? Well, it's everything above that new price with quotas, to the left of the quantity, which is A plus B. And the producer, everything below the price to the left of the quantity, which is C plus G. What's the government getting? Nothing. That's not a tax. It's simply a restriction on the amount coming in. The total welfare then at this point is A plus B plus C plus G. What's the change? The consumer lost C, D, E, and F. The producer gained C. Government's done nothing. The overall net effect is minus D, minus E, minus F. This whole area of DEF is lost. It's an inefficiency in the market. Now, those are your graphs. Well, the question then remains is, if tariffs and import quotas hurt importing countries, such as the U.S., why do they exist? The reason they exist is that producers can make large profits, or what's called rents, quote unquote rents, from tariffs and import quotas. Economists call these efforts to gain profits from government protection rent seeking, S-E-E-K-I-N-G. Because this money, time, and effort spent on lobbying could have been spent producing something else, the deadweight loss from tariffs and quotas will likely understate the true deadweight loss to society. There's an example of that in the sugar industry where you have import quotas and tariffs, et cetera, for sugar. We prop up the sugar industry in this country. And because of that, we end up paying more for sugar overall, a good amount more, than what the open market is in the world. That affects everything that's made with sugar. Chocolates, candies, milk, etc. So the overall effect to the consumers is a negative. The overall effect to the economy is a negative. But the producers sure make out. So why do we even allow that? Because lobbyists pay for that? That's your guess is as good as mine. Okay, so I'm going to stop the lecture for this, and then I'm going to restart to do the problems, but I'm going to stop the lecture for this overall. Keep in mind that most of the stuff we've covered before, as far as comparative advantages, the tariffs, the trade imports, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you just need to go through and kind of read that over. You can get a kind of a good review if you just read through chapters 3 and 6. It talks about trade. These 4 graphs are important to show you how it works, which is more important when you read through chapters 3 and 6. You should understand what's happening a little bit better. So keep that in mind. And when we go through the problems here, it should help you also. So I'm going to stop it just for a second, and then I'm going to record it under another video.